Hey, everybody. I'm Shane with Armchair Rockstar. Thanks for joining us again today. We will be discussing what if Rick Rubin never gave the Red Hot Chili Peppers a second chance. Joining me, as always, our editor in chief, Corey Knowles.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
And also joining us is one of our friends and featured contributors to armchairrockstar.com, Aaron Vaughn.
What's up, guys?
So, the question in front of us tonight is, what if Rick Rubin never gave the Red Hot Chili Peppers a second chance?
Yeah, just for some background here, real quick. The thing that led us to coming up with this question was it's actually an interview with anthonykiedis on Rogan talking about it, but it's been told before that Rick Rubin actually went and checked the Chili's out in like 1985. And he came to their rehearsal space with a couple of people. He sat down and they're playing music or doing whatever they're doing. And he just got up and noped the hell right out and wouldn't answer calls, wouldn't respond. Later on, anthonykiedis had the opportunity to ask him, and he said, "I was afraid someone was going to get murdered in that room." He said it was just that nuts. It was so volatile, and and this is at a time when their addictions are at their peak, and maybe not at their peak, but certainly they were of a concerning level, and they take this, and he just noped out. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that he would have never taken their call again after that. So that's why we're here. Is what's different if they don't? Rick Rubin doesn't take their call at some point.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that the two were going to come back together at some point because the Chili's were doing the LA circuit. Jane's Addiction and the Red Hot Chili Peppers were kind of the two big LA bands at the time, and they were all playing the same venues. I know anthonykiedis said that there was just like a dark energy around that time when Rick Rubin came in.
Yeah.
He didn't even realize it at the time, but it's true. Just the lifestyle that they had. But as Anthony got clean, I don't know what Flea was into, but I feel like it's really hard for him to have a dark energy no matter what he's doing. he's just such a likable guy. The fact that they were continuing that LA circuit is like they and Rick Rubin were going to bump into each other eventually. And when the time was right, it did happen. And it was always going to happen for me because of that. Unless they didn't get clean and, they didn't continue playing music together. But, if they were going to continue on that upward trajectory, like it's two paths crossing, it's just inevitable.
Yeah. It's maybe, the thing is, like it's funny how many things in life just have to happen right for two people to be in that right place at the right time. And I do believe that they reconnected at the perfect juncture in their career. Because like when you go back and listen to the early albums, there was a lot of maturing that was needed musically among them. It was very different. It's still good, it's still solid music, and it still holds up. But you can really tell they're coming into their own. Now, except Flea. For whatever reason, Flea was born playing like he does, I guess. I don't know. I think that's just where it came from. But it's really interesting to me because I feel like it could have not happened. And if it doesn't, there are so many things that are different. Like step one is what happens at the Blood Sugar Sex Magik point if Rick Rubin is not involved?
Yeah. Corey, I think, though, let me backtrack to what you were saying about Flea. I think between the Freaky Styley and the Blood Sugar Sex Magik, there's actually a lot of growth by Flea. So
yeah,
I going back and listening to those two today in prep for this, it was like, it was really interesting to listen to those back to back and hear that growth.
Yeah.
I do tend to agree because Flea had a jazz background. He had a punk background as well. If I'm not mistaken, he played in the band Fear for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
So he had that in his locker, that versatility always. And I think it was John Frusciante that really helped bring out that more melodic side because obviously he can just crush the slap bass. He still does it. If you listen to some of the later stuff, like "Goodbye Angels" on the Getaway album,
Yeah.
like the ending to that song is just him with a bass solo, just crushing a slap bass solo. So I mean, he still does that stuff, but um, I think what Frusciante brought out in him was the ability to be more melodic with it, and you see that in leaps and bounds. In Blood Sugar Sex Magik, especially a little bit on Mother's Milk. I consider Mother's Milk to be more of like a transition album
Yeah.
because Uplift Mofo Party was very much the end of one era for them, I think. And then Mother's Milk is when Chad and Frusciante came on. They were still kind of finding their feet. And I think like Frusciante in particular was still copying Hillel Slovak's style at that time.
Yeah.
So it was funky. It wasn't as melodic as obviously Blood Sugar. So by the time that they came to do that second album, they were all in tune with each other a little bit more, and they learned from each other. And you have that kind of perfect mix at that point. And
Yeah.
it just so happened that that's when Rick Rubin came in, and all the pieces kind of fell into place at once.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Mother's Milk for me is that's my Chili's, if that makes sense. That was like my first Chili's record as a kid. And I probably bought it because there was a topless woman on the front. If I had to guess, I had not heard a song. I did a lot of that as a kid, and but one of the things that's really interesting, and since you bring up Frusciante, is that on Mother's Milk, it's hard rock guitar, it's distortion, it's and then you transition over to Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and suddenly it's clean tones out of a Stratocaster, and such a Stratocaster sound. It's jangly, it's light, it's trebly, and that transition from like Higher Ground and Knock Me Down. There are these like killer power chords and stuff going on in there, and that just doesn't exist when you get to Blood Sugar Sex Magik. It just almost totally transcends into that melodic, clean guitar tone that frankly changed them forever.
Absolutely, and that was Rubin's influence, a lot of it, because their previous producer, Michael Bainhorn, he actually said he wanted more metal edge to it. So he went on to produce at least one album by Soundgarden and a couple of other like grunge,
Yeah.
heavier bands like in the 90s. So he was really pushing for that metal edge. So it's interesting that you really picked up on that in Mother's Milk versus the cleaner tones in Blood Sugar. So that could be down primarily to the difference between Bainhorn and Rick Rubin.
Yeah, it
Well,
very well
and
could be.
do you think? I think it's kind of obvious question, but don't you think that Rick was able to pull more from them as artists and get more out of them by asking the right questions and hearing the right things?
Oh, for
Absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
And the other thing about what we were just discussing there is that uh, the sonic landscape of the Chili Peppers is different than most bands because you have Flea, who plays bass like he's a lead guitarist. So the bass is taking up much more sonic landscape than it does in a traditional kind of standard walking bass type lines. So what's interesting is that when you get rid of the distorted guitars, which live in those same frequencies, and switch over here to this high pitched Stratocaster tone, they live much more separately, and you really feel that if you listen to take take Suck My Kiss and Knock Me Down, and you can really see that it's like what Frusciante, what his transition did, also created like this little nest for Flea to sit in and really make his bass stand out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at a song like Naked in the Rain on Mother's Milk versus like obviously like Under the Bridge from Blood Sugar.
Yeah.
It's just night and day, that difference. And I think you're right. I think you're onto something with that sonic landscape and how the frequencies are living sort of in the same place. But another thing about Blood Sugar, what made it so different is I know Frusciante said it was like one of the happiest times in his life. And I think part of that was due to the fact that they rented out like a mansion around Hollywood or like somewhere in California anyway, because they said, you know, they'd done the studio thing several times, and they just didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy the experience, so they just rented out this house and they were kind of free to be creative. And I think that's what Rubin does as well. Is he allows the space for the musicians to do what they do and creates kind of a safe space, for better lack of a term, for them to thrive and just live in that creative moment.
You know, it's an interesting analogy here is when you think about the Ramones did End of the Century with Phil Spector. And in that record, I heard somebody say once, I don't remember who it is, somebody will say in the comments, instead of Phil Spector coming to where the Ramones were, the Ramones kind of went to Phil Spector in a way that like the music became more spectery and not just a grown up Ramones. Where what Rubin does is very much the opposite of that. Rubin, you know, I mean, you can't record for bands like Run DMC, Johnny Cash, and Slayer and incorporate so much of yourself onto it. And it's like what he does is come in and pull it out of them in a way. Like, you know, I've heard stories about, you know, Serge Tankian in Chop Suey. There's an interview where they're talking about it and they get to that point where it's like, Father, why have you forsaken me, and all that. And Serge tells a story about how Rick told him to grab a book off his shelf, random book, flip it open to a page. And they flipped it open and they got to that line and he just sang it into the song. Like it wasn't something they wrote, it was something they just grabbed with this random chance. And it's not a Rubin stamp as so much as it is Rubin, the psychologist and magical mingler of brains.
Well, and if I remember
That's his official
correctly,
term.
yeah, if I remember correctly from that Phil Spector, that was a very confrontational relationship and
Yes.
not a very friendly one at that.
Yeah. Well, a couple of them were not fans. I want to
Yeah.
say Johnny Markey, I think.
Well,
Markey?
he was a controlling dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You know, I know John Lennon said that, you know, when he had Phil Spector at his house, it's like they were eating breakfast and they're just like chatting and having a good time, and then Phil Spector comes downstairs and everybody just shuts up. It's like, you know, they were all intimidated by him, even back then, before all the bullshit. You know,
Like
Yeah.
before he may or may not have killed someone. Yeah.
allegedly. Yeah.
Allegedly. Well,
It's really interesting because it's such a small world and there are all these differences you can see from one to the next. But like Rubin forever changed the Chili's. I don't know if it was giving them the instruction and musical maturity that they needed at that point to be able to find their direction. But Aaron, do you know how many albums he's done with them? He's done a bunch, right?
So I believe it's 5 studio albums, at least. So he did Blood Sugar, and then he did one Hot Minute. He did everything up to The Getaway, which was Josh Klinghoffer's second album with them after John left for the second time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because apparently Josh Klinghoffer did not get along with Rick Rubin at all. In fact, he had some very choice words for him. He said, like, they got in an argument and he said, you know, I'm just trying to, like Rick said, I'm just trying to make the music the best it could be. And he said he was thinking in his mind, then order a driver to come here and take you home.
Ouch. You know, I'll be honest. I don't want to be placed in a situation where I would have to choose between my guitarist and Rick Rubin being the producer of my record.
You know what? At that point, Rubin had a lot more clout than Josh Klinghoffer did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Chili's stood behind Klinghoffer instead of being like, "Whoa, son, this is the Kingmaker," you know, like.
Yeah.
Don't
But
ruffle his feathers. He's going to drive you nuts. That's his job. You should hate him by the time the album's done.
yeah. Maybe he was just pissed that the first album didn't get the reception that he wanted. I'm sure there was some tension there. It's big shoes to fill when you're trying to replace John Frusciante, right?
Yeah.
And yes, they did. The band stood by him as far as the producer, but when John said he wanted to come back to the band, they ousted Josh immediately
and brought back Rick.
That says a lot right there.
Yeah. There's a lot of bands that he's kind of the unofficial extra member.
Yeah.
I was looking through his discography this morning, and I kept coming through I'm like, cool. So he did King of Rock with Run DMC, did the Beastie Boys, but he also did Rain and Blood and South of Heaven with Slayer. 2 years later. That's so crazy. And I'm looking through here and I'm seeing Danzig's first record.
Yeah, his 80s work is insane.
Andrew Dice Clay, The Day the Laughter Died, is one of the craziest recordings ever.
Yeah.
The Ghetto Boys' first album. We got Wolfsbane. We got more Slayer. So Mix-a-Lot. The Cult, several Cult records in here. Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. I mean, and then we get to, we're not even talking yet about Tom Petty, Nine Inch Nails, Johnny Cash. I mean, to go from Run DMC to Slayer to the Red Hot Chili Peppers to Johnny Cash and an acoustic album, mostly a heavily rootsy album in Wildflowers with Tom Petty. In the normal world, when you deal with producers, they're rock producers, there are rap producers, there are contemporary Christian producers. They don't generally do albums with everything or anyone who walks in. And
cross genre.
It is. System of a Down. Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm still in the 90s. It is so crazy. It's just looking at this Sheryl Crow. That is such a.
Well, let me ask a pre-Rubens question.
Okay.
With some band changes. So aside from the stylistic changes, do you guys think that Chad and John were more versed at their instruments than Hillel and I guess it was drummer Jack Irons at the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, here's the deal. Yes, and that's because at that point the Chili's had gotten to a point where they could kind of take any drummer and any guitarist they wanted. So they were going to be more professional, technically musicians than who they had when they started the band out. When you've gotten to a certain level of fame, you can kind of pick and choose who you want to join. So Chad obviously was a great musician in his own right. When he joined the Chili's, he was pretty young. Frusciante even younger, 18 at that point. Which shows you just how good and how talented he is naturally to be 18 years old. I think he's 5 to 7 years younger than the rest of them to come in because it was an audition in LA. So to be able to beat out every other LA guitarist and them say, okay, we want you. That's pretty impressive. So, I mean, they were better at their instruments because they were able to get that talent at that point in time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd also like to voice a protest right now that no one was interested in doing this podcast in socks. I feel like if we're going to cover the Chili's,
socks wear.
Yeah. I feel like.
What are you talking about putting those socks?
You're not wearing yours?
Oh, you can only see my top half. I mean, hey, I came prepared. We can.
Yes, just know below the frames, we're stocking.
I can stand up right now.
Yeah, I must have not gotten that email.
Yeah, sure you didn't.
Another interesting Rubin take here is that you always hear the story. Kiedis has told it a bunch of times. Rubin's told it that, he kept getting Anthony to pull out his notebooks and be like, "Show me all your songs. Show me all your songs. Show me all your songs." And in one of them, he came to this, and Kiedis was like, "This is just a little sensitive guy poem I wrote," and it turns out to be Under the Bridge. So no Rubin arguably means that the Chili Peppers did not record the single biggest song they ever recorded, the song that took them from small clubs to arenas and stadiums. Like that was the crossover song that brings their style of music to top 40 and puts them in front of John Q. Public. And a lot of people who would absolutely not have given a band who came out with an album that all sounded like Give It Away, they would never have given them a chance. You've got this new fan base, and suddenly they have mass appeal that they never had. Do you think, how does No Under the Bridge impact the future of the Chili Peppers?
Oh yeah, and you know what? That opened up even so. Yeah, it was a huge hit. But at the same time, I think what's maybe even bigger than that is that was the first time that Anthony had really opened up in his songwriting. Because I mean, before that, look, it's all about having a good time. You've got the song "Good Time Boys." I mean, you've got sex rap, you've got Yertle the Turtle. It's not deep, and that was kind of no one thinks of Anthony as a shy person, but he at that point still hadn't exposed that side of himself and written a song where he was talking about how lonely he was, how sad he was, reflecting on his addiction, and
Yeah.
that was just not part of their repertoire at that point. So it was a huge hit, but it was by no means a one-hit wonder. That started this meteoric climb that they've had ever since. And
Yeah.
Shortly after that, I mean, you have Californication, which has got so much more of that. It's got deeper lyrics. It's got it's obviously more melodic musically. But yeah, I think that's really what opened the door for that depth of the lyrics and helped the band also come together more. Because I keep talking about Frusciante because he's my favorite member of the band. I think he's one of the most talented artists of the last couple of decades. His solo stuff is incredible.
Agreed.
So Frusciante, I know, had a bit of a rift with Anthony because they come from totally different worlds. Anthony, like, I saw an interview where Anthony was saying, like, John just operates differently. Like, he can come out with all of this incredible music, like, right from his soul. Like, he's connected to the muse 24/7, but he doesn't have a driver's license. Like, he doesn't know how to drive a car. You know what I mean? And so it's like they helped each other in that Anthony was able to get that mass appeal to a more general audience and kind of show this creativity and virtuosity of Flea and John and Chad. And it seemed like John wasn't getting much back from that, but a song like Under the Bridge showed the poet kind of inside of Anthony, and it maybe made them a little bit closer. Just that connection between the band members and helped with their friendship and the ultimate longevity of the band.
For sure. On a flip side, though, wasn't there a point, one of the times Frusciante left, wasn't it due to kind of a series of creative differences between he and Flea, where he wanted to go a more melodic route, probably much more in the direction of what his solo music is, where Flea wanted to stick more to that classic, slappy funk, party music kind of feel, and that difference played a role in one of his exits from the band?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because everything that I've seen from them, like all the interviews, are pretty vague. I mean, from what I understand, like, when he left the first time, I think it was in like 94, 93, 94. John's drug addiction was really ramping up. Anthony had been sober for a little while. I know that there were differences especially between John and Anthony, and then Flea was pissed off at John because he couldn't mend that fence. But as far as the musical direction, I'm not too sure.
It's interesting. I can't remember where I saw that. I think it was on Punk Rock MBA. He did a little, like, a shorter kind of documentary run through, and it was one of the things that came up that struck me as interesting, because I guess I think of it as the difference in, like, for me, like, Give It Away feels Flea. Like, that's a Flea type song. Where when I think John Frusciante, I think more Under the Bridge, I think Zephyr.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
like that are.
Well, apparently, Zephyr was on One Hot Minute, which Navarro played on.
Oh, I
So,
didn't even know that.
I'm not sure. Navarro is in the video for it. I'm not sure if John had already worked out the guitar parts, and they had worked on that like
Yeah.
pre-Navarro. But I know like the finished product was definitely Navarro on guitar, which is an interesting one too. Because when I go back and listen to One Hot Minute, like it really holds up, even though it's Navarro was only on one album. Songs like Coffee Shop and Walkabout, and of course Zephyr Song. I mean, they're staples, and they hold up for me. So it's
Yeah.
an interesting dynamic. Apparently, like they said, they had creative differences and it wasn't working out. But I mean, what if Navarro had stayed on? I wonder what the direction would have been.
Yeah, because stylistically, Navarro's, Frusciante
makes
and
sense.
Navarro are pretty far apart, I
Yeah.
would say, stylistically. So that would have been an interesting take, getting a second album out with Navarro.
You know what? And in redoing all this, Navarro never crossed my mind once in preparing for this. But he's an interesting fit for them. Now, creatively, where that lands, I'm not sure. But yeah, I love Frusciante. I feel like Frusciante plays with a unique style. Like it's always so clean. Like I always think, I don't even hardly hear amp drive. It's just so clean what he's doing, and it's weird for such, fast-paced hot songs to be that clean. But I guess that's probably that funk influence, that 70s
Yeah. Well,
kind of.
he can play a lot, and I saw a video recently of him playing when he was like 16, 17, and he was doing some Eddie Van Halen stuff. I mean, he was doing tapping. I mean, it was like almost 80s hair metal to even a little bit of thrash in there. So you don't see any of that on the Chili's albums. You certainly don't see it in his solo albums, but it shows that he had that ability at such
Yeah.
a young age. And if you look at someone like Jimi Hendrix, right, it's the perfect kind of combination of technicality and then emotion and soul. And
Yeah,
I
because
think
his shit is hard. His songs are hard to play on guitar. It took me forever to get through Under the Bridge.
I'm only halfway through Under the Bridge.
And what's the other one? Snow.
Oh yeah.
Snow has got this this really fast picking thing
All throughout. All
that
throughout.
I am yes all through the song, and it's just tens of thousands of opportunities for me to fall on my face, and I never fail. I always
Yeah,
manage
especially
to fall through on that song.
if you're playing it solo, and so you're having to do the vocals and you're having to do the guitar work, which is so intricate. It's a really hard combination.
Oh yeah, it would be a terrible, like, acoustic guitar and a guy song. like to sit there, because it's hard enough to sing and play at once, because you've got multiple rhythms going on. You've got two hands to worry about, and your words and your pitch and your tempo and your strumming pattern. There's so many things to go wrong, and a song like that is just ridiculously hard.
So back to Rubin.
Yeah.
Yeah. While we're here,
yeah.
so back to
Rubin.
Rubin, boys.
I was thinking like it's even more impressive what he's done in his career, knowing that he didn't come from an engineering background at all.
Yeah.
Like he is not an audio engineer. He's, like you said, he's a psychologist. He operates in the mind of bands, and I'm wondering how that translates to his success and how much of uh, an influence he actually has in the engineering side of it. I mean, I know that like in the last couple of Chili's albums, like he was working pretty closely on the master recording, like right at the end. So, but how much influence does he have in that side of
Like,
it?
is he actually sitting there turning knobs, or is he there as the brain with Rogan referred to it as the magic in talking about
He
Rick Rubin.
did.
He's just got this magic.
There's an interesting piece with Rubin and I think it's McCartney, and they're reviewing different pieces of music. And Rubin picking out things it's a good watch.
Oh wow,
So I think yes,
I've seen that.
part psychologist, but I also think he just has that natural ear to hear things.
And hear not just what it is, but what it could be.
What it
Like
could
if
be,
you're into
yeah.
rehabbing houses or rebuilding old cars, you have to have this ability to walk in and see this pile of shit laying there that looks like a mess. But you've got to be able to tell that, you know what, if I did this and I did this and I did this, that's not just a pile of nuts and bolts anymore with a bunch of rust. That's a screaming machine running down the highway. And I think that's what he has, that ability to see the sum of the parts and not just the parts, and what it is that if properly melded and interlaced, what they can become. And he does it like no one else. I mean, there wasn't rap before Rick Rubin, really. Like there was rap, but it was not on the radio. It was something guys in Brooklyn did outside their homes and in little clubs and on the side of the street. And he took that. Not only did he do that, he then took it and shoved him in a studio with Aerosmith and was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's stick these together, see what
And
happens."
then took
What a
heat
song, too.
from both sides. Both
Yes,
the
yes,
rap
the rap
community
fans
and
were
the
pissed.
rock community gave him heat over that.
Everyone was pissed, and what it was great, and it was the future. I mean, eventually it's a genre.
So, is it that he has this magic? And I believe he does, but or is it the ability to see trends before they happen?
I think maybe that is what it is. Is this ability to see, because you've also got to know, what are people listening to? What do they like? And then not just what is this shitty top 40 music I'm hearing, but what is it in that music that is drawing them? Is it some specific type progression? Is it always a 4-to-1 drop? Is it playing in minor chords? There's a variety of different things. Is it auto tune? But I think he has. You're right. That ability to go to even pop music and recognize what in there is tickling the fancy of John Q. Public, for lack of a
Yeah,
better way to put it.
yeah, because funk rock wasn't really a thing at the time. Rick Rubin picked up on the Chili's. Obviously, rap wasn't a thing at the time before Rick Rubin picked it up. New
Well,
metal
I
wasn't
was going to
really a
say
thing.
Parliament might have something to say
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
Parliament.
Funk
No,
not
well,
being
that's
a thing.
that's true. That's true. And you know what? They got the Chili's got the foremost musician to produce Freaky Styley and George
Right,
Clinton.
George Clinton.
Yeah,
And you know what?
exactly.
As far as Freaky Styley goes, um, you were saying that like they were still on this progression to maturity, but I feel like Freaky Styley was almost a mature version of the style that they had at that time. You
Okay.
know, like with Hillel Slovak. As far as Anthony's chops, as far as rapping, Flea obviously still killing it at the bass at that point. Which gave it that funk sensibility. So I think in that genre where they were at that time, it's actually pretty mature. And like I said, they got George Clinton in like the best possible person you could get for that genre.
Yeah.
And it, that was kind of their magnum opus as far as that genre goes. And then they had to move on, and they had to diversify their sound, which has become a staple of Red Hot Chili Peppers music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought there was such a leap between Freaky Styley and Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Those two albums specifically,
Oh,
not only
absolutely.
in especially in the production value, because you can hear Anthony's vocals a lot. They just it's clearer. There's a little more growl to his voice. Um, it's kind of more like the Chili's we know now versus the old
Yeah.
Yeah,
party group.
yeah.
Well, and
And
Ruben might do things like come out and say, you know what, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, to the point that you're pissed and angry. Sometimes it's about eliciting the right emotion at the moment you're saying. And I believe a good producer can draw that out of you. Like tell you to go outside and run around the block 3 times, then come in and do it right
yeah,
now while your heart's at 140 beats per minute. I want it while you're angry, while you're winded. I want the passion, and that's the kind of thing a good producer can really pull out. And Ruben is a master of that.
well, you know what? He had his work cut out for him with Anthony Kiedis, because like moving from rap to doing a song like Under the Bridge. I mean, or Breaking the Girl. Um, it's it was so far out of his wheelhouse. He did not come on as a singer. He is very much like Mick Jagger in that he's a front man. He's not necessarily a singer. I mean,
Yeah, David Lee Roth's that way too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like I once posted something on social media in like a Red Hot Chili Peppers like fan group, just to troll and piss people off, and I said Anthony Anthony Kiedis is one of the top 5 rock singers of the last 30 years. Like clearly.
Ooh. Oh,
Yeah,
and
that'll trigger him.
and it did, it pissed people off because he's not a singer by nature. So Rick Rubin coming in and trying to get the best out of every single band member. I think I remember watching in the Funky Monks documentary that was
That's so great.
yeah, that it was about the recording of Blood Sugar. Like Anthony is just over and over and over again trying to nail Under the Bridge.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And you just keep pushing. And sometimes the takes you're getting are perfectly fine. But sometimes it's what you want to capture, that you want that voice where it's kind of like a good tube amp, where you get right to the edge of it crackling, but you don't cross it. You're right at that edge. And yeah, such a good producer can really pull that out of guys. Like uh who's a good example? Never mind.
Well,
Sorry, my brain just went empty.
yeah, I mean, for Anthony, it's not even about getting the perfect take. It's about staying on pitch. It's like if he can be somewhere in key, then he's doing pretty well. I mean, I saw
Within a half step, that's all we need. Yeah.
yeah. I saw a recent video of him doing a cover of "Smells Like Teen Spirit,"
Oh, I
really?
saw that.
and to be honest, it was terrible.
That's a statement coming from you, sir.
Yeah.
I know the regard with which you hold your Chili Peppers.
Oh, for sure. And the regard I hold, every band that I appreciate and respect. And if any band is going to do a cover of it, I expect them to do it well. And they did not do that well.
They did not, or he did not.
No, Frusciante was great in his parts, but Anthony, I think he forgot the lyrics at some point. I don't know if he even really knew the song.
We didn't even know him in the 90s for a while.
Yeah.
When it came on television, before you had like a CD with a lyric sheet, it was a little difficult,
Yeah. But and speaking to that, their cover of Fire by Jimi Hendrix. I mean, okay, so you like that. Obviously, like from your reaction, you think it was a good cover.
I do. I enjoyed it. Here's the deal. It's very different. At certain parts, it becomes a Chili Peppers song, but they held it through most of it. You feel, like, yeah, we can play this, but we're going to put our own spin on it anyway, and that's what they did, and I'm okay with that. Like, you look at, it's less drastic, but if you look at Shinedown's cover of Simple Man, it's pretty true, but like the guitar parts are mixed up a little. Uh, there's a little more passion at some different places. There are elements that are different. Now, Fire is considerably different from Jimmy. However, I feel like it just captured the right essence with a 80s Chili spin. And I've always felt like for me, one of the reasons that I believe the Chili's remain relevant is because they started 10 years earlier than the world was ready for. Like what the Chili Peppers were doing, it makes sense that coming out of the 70s where funk was a thing, rap's taken off, and heavy metal's coming up through Hollywood in a big way, that you would have this convergence of these styles. And it's there and it was good, but the rest of the world wasn't ready for what Hollywood was doing yet with them specifically. And I feel like Blood Sugar Sex Magik was the world catching up to the Chili Peppers. It was them reaching peak musical maturity with combining with a world that was ready for that. Because then we've had grunge. Before that, you're listening to the Chili Peppers in the time when Total Eclipse of the Heart was like a top 10 song and stuff like that, where the contrast is so much different than it is in an age of bands like Cake, for example, who are a little weird and a little kind of in that realm.
Yeah, they're catchy. They're weird, but they're
Yeah.
catchy. Cake,
Yeah, weird, but like you find yourself listening, it's like Clutch, one of those bands that like I never super got into, but I'll hear a song and I'll be like, yeah, it's
It
pretty
just
epic.
kind of, you hear it on the radio. Yeah, they get a little radio.
Since we're going to digress on the Cake, I thought their first album was really awesome.
I like the first album.
Yeah,
I do. It was solid, and there have been plenty of good ones of theirs over the years since then. I don't know how we got here though.
yeah.
Well, okay. So I wanted to give my
degrees of Rick Rubin.
I wanted to give my thoughts on Fire.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree. It was a decent cover, but I disagree where you say that they kept the heart of it or they kept the essence of it, because it was so sped up. The thing about Fire is it's supposed to be sexy. It's like it's got this groove to it, and it's like, hey girl, let me stand next to your fire. But they made it almost like a punk song. It's like a little too fast. It's it's like a good lovemaking session. It's got to be at the.
It's all about pace.
It's all about pace. It's got to be at the right cadence. So and also the thing about a great cover or a top cover is it becomes the quintessential version. Look at All Along the Watchtower, right?
Knocking on Heaven's Door when Guns N' Roses redid it.
There you go.
It was better than Bob Dylan's.
For some reason, everybody does Bob Dylan songs better than Bob Dylan.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I forget All Along the Watchtower. We're still talking about Dylan songs. Yeah.
He tees it up and then the bands knock it out of the park. So Hurt by Johnny Cash.
Hurt by Johnny Cash.
I mean, come on. A really tough one is Sound of Silence by Disturbed, because I mean, come on, Simon and Garfunkel. That's a classic, and you can't get better than that. But man, Disturbed just brought this totally new aspect to it. And you know what? The Chili's did that with Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder as well.
Yep.
For me, Chili's Higher Ground is the quintessential version.
Yeah, that is so great. Hot take here. I don't like Disturbed's cover of Sound of Silence.
All right, shots fired. All right.
Yeah, somebody's going to come at me for this. I'll have I'll have people with signs in the yard tomorrow. But I don't know what it is. I just couldn't get it. With that said, their cover of Land of Confusion by Genesis is like one of the best, my favorite covers ever.
So, it's, and where does fire fall in that? I mean, it is not the version of that song. I mean, Jimmy
it's not.
is still the king of that song.
You're right. That's still Jimmy's song. I agree.
But who the hell's gonna take that away from Jimmy?
You can't take anything away from Jimmy.
No.
I think that's the problem, is the fact that they tried to cover a Jimmy song in the first place.
There are certain people I hear people try to cover. You ever notice you don't hear a lot of AC/DC covers? Because there aren't people who sing like that.
Except
the voice is not a thing that other bands do. You know who can cover AC/DC? Like Axl. Axl Rose can cover. Well, actually, he sang for AC/DC on tour for a year. He was AC/DC's singer for one summer. And it was really, really, really good. He broke his leg and borrowed Dave Grohl's throne from when Grohl broke his leg. But he was not letting that ruin his chance at being the lead vocals for his childhood favorite band.
Well, I will say your average drunk frat guy does a pretty good job at AC/DC at a late night karaoke.
Yeah, that's fair.
There you go.
They're great karaoke songs. But yeah, what's funny about Higher Ground is apparently like the record label at the time said, okay, so you need to do a cover for this album. And you can either pick from... I
heard Fire and said, no, you need to do a better one.
I guess maybe they had a quota of like a couple. Yeah, right.
Sorry.
So I think they were given a choice between a New Kids on the Block song and Stevie Wonder's Higher Ground.
Oh, Jesus.
So imagine if it had gone the opposite direction.
I'm really glad they went to Rick Rubin.
Yeah. How would it have gone the other direction with the funk background? I mean,
I'm picturing them doing like Hanging Tough.
That's why I think Higher Ground was an easy decision on that. On their
part. Yeah. Like it feels like the producer was like, I really want him to do Higher Ground, so I'm going to give him that and the worst possible option I can come up with for them to cover.
Right.
And like, yeah, as long as we give you what we want, and it's it's how you get a good magazine cover through.
Exactly.
Take the good one. And you stay next to one you don't like.
That's classic record label behavior. That's executives sitting in a boardroom like, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, some jackass fresh out of marketing school is like, I feel like we could really push this album if we had a New Kids on the Block cover. Yeah. And instead of just backhanding that person in the mouth like they should have been, apparently I just, that boggles my mind.
Yeah, imagine how history could have been changed with that in a different universe, in a different dimension. The Red Hot Chili Peppers have a New Kids on the Block cover somewhere.
Yeah, it's like finding out that Ozzy Osbourne was a Vegas lounge act. Like it doesn't make any sense, and I can't picture the world with that.
Man, I would love that though.
Yeah, I'd go see Ozzy the lounge.
I'd go see Ozzy. Yeah,
crazy.
So I want to touch on kind of the modern Chili's, and when Rick Rubin came back after. For those who don't know, after the falling out between Josh Klinghoffer on his first album with the Chili's, I'm With You, the second album, The Getaway, was produced by Danger Mouse, and that it was a slightly different sound, obviously. And then when Frusciante came back, they came out with Unlimited Love and Return of the Dream Canteen. Back to back in the same year, 2 double albums in the same year,
and a Record Store Day special release.
I've got mine. I've got the holographic cover.
Yeah.
I had a poster that came with it, but my wife won't let me put it up in the office. So,
women, I'm telling you, I'm sorry. That's going to get us canceled. We have 7 listeners, and 6 of them are mad now.
It's check your demographics on the website, man. I think you're all right.
Thanks, Corey.
She was like, yeah, I don't want to have like 4 naked dudes in their 50s like on the wall. Like, it could be worse. They could have had socks on their cocks.
They could have had socks on. That's the poster you really wanted. You know it is, because it's great.
It's a classic, man. Come on.
I love that. You know, you look at that era and you think about the things all these bands were doing, like Motley Crue sitting around and they're like, I guess we can get some satanic imagery to hang up so people will freak out. And the Chili's are like, well, we can't afford imagery, so let's go get some Hanes tube socks.
It's the shock
And
value,
go live
you know?
on stage with it.
You know, it's always about the shock value. Alice Cooper, Kiss. Then they took it even further with Motley Crue,
Yeah,
Slayer, and all that kind of stuff.
Then we get into Marilyn Manson and Rob
and then
Zombie.
Marilyn Manson just took the take on that one. Yeah.
All right, Manson, you win. We get it.
But my original question was, you know, obviously, like, so if you look at it right now, the Chili's are back on top of the world. You know, they're doing the late night shows again. You know, they're doing all the big interviews. They're selling out stadiums. I went to go see them in Orlando last year. You know, 65,000 people stadium.
Wow.
Madness.
That's awesome.
And you know, they absolutely killed it. And I think a lot of that is due to Frusciante rejoining the band. But what does Rick Rubin have to do with that? I mean, after The Getaway, which was, I mean, commercially a flop. I think there are some good tunes on it. I think there are some good tracks, but it was commercially a flop. Do you think Rick Rubin has a significant influence in them getting back on top post John Frusciante, or is it just the allure of having their old band member back?
I do. I think if they have the magic sauce, and the magic sauce is Rick Rubin, and they pop right back. I mean, it's no coincidence to me that there's one album where suddenly they're not there. You know, suddenly it's not a commercial success. You know, and it's interesting because I look at The Getaway and today, and I am not. I love the Chili's, but I am not the level of fan that Aaron is here, to be clear. And so to me, the first thought I had when I looked at The Getaway was, I don't know a single song on this record. But I listened to 2. I listened to Goodbye Angels at your suggestion, Aaron. And I listened to
solo.
Yeah.
That's why
And I
wrote
listened to
that
Dark
one down.
Necessities. Dark Necessities was also a good one. But it's very much it's a different Chili's.
It is. It's a very different Chili's. And you know, they still get the radio play for the singles. I remember during that time when I'm With You came out in 2011, and when The Getaway came out a couple years later, can't remember exactly what year. You know, the big one was Rain Dance Maggie from I'm With You, and they played it on the radio for a couple months, like right after the album came out. And then they played Dark Necessities on the radio for a couple of months after that album came out. Now, the difference is they only played it for a couple of months. It was like they were obligated. It's a new Chili's album. It's a new Chili's like single off the album. So yeah, we'll play it. But you know, with songs like Tip of My Tongue, and I'm drawing a blank, Black Summer from Unlimited Love. You know,
Yeah.
I think those ones will hold up. I think they get radio play consistently through the likes of, you know, Californication and Dead in California and Scar Tissue, and you know,
Yeah,
the list goes on. Give it away.
Californication and the Stadium Arcadium
Yeah.
album that got all kinds of radio play.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, has done
Banger after banger.
too.
Yeah.
As long as modern civilization still has radio, those songs will be played. You know?
You know, it's so interesting too, because we're, 40 years into the Chili Peppers. You ever sat down and thought about how many bands from the 80s are still recording and touring 40 years later? Like, it wasn't like that in the early 60s. I mean, there's a few, aside from the Stones and McCartney and all. But there's not and has not been the just sheer number of bands who were hugely successful who just continue making music. Now, some of them with none or one original member, like I think of Foreigner, for example. But it's really interesting the staying power of some of the music that started between 1980 and 1992. A lot of
And
those bands are around.
yeah, and you still have to give credit to the Chili's for their versatility over
Mhm.
time.
100%.
When they started changing, or not changing, but adding genres, even their new stuff. I mean, you've got songs like "Go Robot" off of The Getaway, which is it's like a disco funk tune. Like it's totally different. Bastards of Light on Unlimited Love is like an electronic track,
Oh,
which is
nice.
super different. So they've still got these gems, hidden within their albums that push the envelope, are different. You don't hear from other bands. Like the new Stones album just came out, and it's great. It's like harkening back to their earlier stuff, but I don't hear anything necessarily like new or innovative from it. And it's something is the Stones have been a throwback for a long time,
Yeah.
but the Phillies, it's like every album it's a new experience. It's not like they're just doing a greatest hits tour. They're
Yeah.
still coming out with bangers that are different and new.
Yeah.
They're a current band, even though they are 40 years old.
Do you one more question here on the topic. I keep getting pulled. I keep thinking in tangents. I'm the world's worst about that. Uh, how do you believe? So, if there's no Rubin, Blood Sugar Sex Magik probably still comes out, but it's probably not. I mean, it's definitely not the same record. Uh, does that affect their legacy and influence on young bands still to this day? If Blood Sugar Sex Magik is not the breakout monster that it was, suppose it's just a good Chili's album.
Well, I mean, first of all, don't you have to take Under the Bridge off?
Yeah,
So
that changes things.
that changes a lot.
It does. I wish, and I tried to find before this. If you're watching this and you have links to what I'm about to ask you, please share them with us. I was looking for early demos from some of the Blood Sugar Sex Magik songs. And I looked around, and I didn't find anything. I found a thread on Reddit that had a link to a video, but when I got there, it was a private video, and whoever owns it has to give you access to the video that is supposedly a lot of demo tracks from that era. And I was curious to see if we had those songs somewhere in a pre-Rubin state. Like what was the original demo like? Because like you could do that with Green Day just released the 30th anniversary of Dookie, and there's like 2 or 3 levels of demos, and you can hear these songs going through the transitions. They start so different. Some of them are very close, not a big difference, but some of them are radically different. And I'd be really curious if those are out there somewhere to sit down and give them a listen just for fun.
I'd love to listen to them. Yeah. Whether it was Ruben or whether it was, the band members and their evolution at that point, I think ultimately, if Blood Sugar doesn't come out, maybe the way that it did come out, it wouldn't have skyrocketed them to that
Yeah.
point, and they might have faded away. So yeah, I think Ruben has a huge influence on that. And I think the demos will be very telling to see just how big that influence was.
So their trajectory definitely would have changed with that
I think so.
involved.
I mean, I'm not saying that they don't record an album with, Jeff Lynne or someone else. Not Jeff Lynne. What a
Jeff
terrible
Lynne.
pairing. Not I wouldn't even say Danger Mouse, because to me that's a weird pairing. But Danger Mouse likes being paired with bands that don't seem right. Like he did an album with the Black Keys, which is the opposite of where you would expect Danger Mouse to be. But there are definitely other people. Maybe they worked with Bob Rock had a little more of a metal sound than they do as a result or something. Doesn't mean it wouldn't have still been absolutely great, but it might have been very different. If somebody doesn't create that, and I still think a lot of it comes down to wherever that sonic difference was discovered to separate flea and the guitars. Because when you pull a guitar is an instrument that lives in the mid frequencies. It's a mids instrument, and a bass is like mids down. So by switching to that strat, you've suddenly got your guitars playing way up in some higher frequencies, and I think there's a big difference there, and I don't know if that would have gotten there with someone else. Could it have still come and been great? Yeah, but does it absolutely change the future for everything Chili's and Chili's adjacent? Yes. I think it does, and I don't mean that to undercredit the Chili's. I mean, in the end, this is their music, this is their thing. But sometimes we all need coaches, and that's what a producer does. He comes in and he coaches a band and turns them into the best version of themselves that they can be, and that's what Rick Rubin did with the Chili's. He came in and he made them see and realize the ability they had to be great, and pulled it right out like a champ.
Well said, man. Here to Rick Rubin and
and the Chili's
for the current iteration of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They've gone through a few.
Hell yeah, they have, and I guess we'll be seeing them in another 10 years as long as everybody hangs in there and stays healthy.
I hope so, man. Anthony looks like he's 20 years younger than he is.
I wish he'd shave the mustache.
Yeah, I don't like
the mustache hurts me so bad.
Yeah, very bad.
He's always been like this ripped, sexy dude, but I see that mustache and I'm like, damn, what is that? But maybe that's the idea. They've always liked to be just a little different, and he's a unique guy. He's an interesting person to listen to talk, very in touch with himself, in touch with like his inner spiritual being, and he's an interesting guy to listen to when he gets deep.
For sure.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us today. Appreciate your time, and please take a moment to like, subscribe, maybe check out the website, armchairrockstar.com.
Armchairrockstar.com.
What do you think happens if the Chili's do not get a second shot with Rick Rubin? We want to hear your thoughts too, so let us know in the comments. Tell us you hate us. We don't care. Let us know what happens if they don't have Rick Rubin.
That's right. See you guys.
Cheers.